Well, please welcome Florida's now senior Senator Marco Rubio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It doesn't feel senior, but that's fine.
Well, the president orders a national emergency, and while ordering it, says it's something he does not need to do.
Well, I don't know why he said what he said. Again, it's not a legal declaration in that sense. But I don't like what he did. I don't think it's a good idea. Let me break it down why. The president, and this is important, people got to get to the details of this. The president wanted $5.7 billion for border security. That $5.7 billion funds the top 10 priorities of the border security plan. He can get 4.5 of that $5.7 billion without touching the emergency declaration. He's got $1.375 billion from the spending bill. He's got about $600 million and that he can get from the forfeiture fund, which is money that we've taken from drug dealers and things like that. And then he's got another 2.7 from the anti-drug fund inside the Department of Defense. That gets you to 4.5 of the 5.7 billion. That probably is enough to do all of the wall, since not all 5.7 billion was for wall, and some other stuff on top of it. The problem with the emergency declaration is twofold. One, it's either illegal or Congress has given way too much power to the executive through the laws we've passed. Congress emergencies are supposed to be declared for something that's urgent, immediate, and that Congress doesn't have time to get together and work on, that the normal process doesn't have time to deal with. Congress just dealt with this. I don't like the outcome. I support the wall. But there has to be a separation of powers that we have to respect. The courts will decide that. The other reason why I don't like it is that money, the remaining 1-point-something billion he wants, it could come out of, or must come out of, military construction. And that's going to have an impact here in Florida potentially. It's going to impact MacDill. It could impact our facilities in Northwest Florida. We have to rebuild Tyndall. And frankly, we have very serious problems all across this country in our military installations that need to be rebuilt. We can't afford to take any money out of that budget. So that in and of itself is enough reason to say this is a bad idea.
Court will ultimately decide if the president overstepped legally on this. You challenged Governor Christ when you thought he overstepped when you were leading the State House. Do you think President Trump overstepped legally, in your opinion?
Well, it all comes down to, I've had time to go back and actually read the law that Congress passed, the emergency declaration law. It is so broadly written that he probably has a fair chance to go to court and argue that we've given him that authority. Our predecessors 25, 30 years ago. So, as I said, one of two things has happened. He's either overstepped or that law needs to be fixed.
So you will vote in favor of disapproving this declaration of a national emergency?
Well, I need to see how the disapproval is couched. If they try to go after the forfeiture money or if they try to go after the DOD anti-drug money, I would not support that part of it because I think he has a right to use that. That's what that money's there for. I will oppose any efforts to use military construction money for this purpose because we need that military construction money for our facilities. I will also support efforts to reform the emergency declaration law, which I think is even more important than the first point because it applies to the future, to pull back some of that power if in fact the legislative branch has delegated too much. We've got to respect our Constitution, and it wanted this tension, and in fact it created legislative superiority, not equality, superiority in terms of funding and the like. If we've delegated that much power, and that's what the courts decide, we need to reform that law.
It's tax time. While most have seen their taxes go down, there are some working class filers who say, wait a minute, their taxes went up. For example, someone who has a couple with 4 kids. They lose their exemptions. The increase in the deduction is not enough to counter that, nor is the expansion of the child tax credit or the reduction of rates. They wind up paying more. What do you say to them?
I have to see the specific example of which ones you're pointing to. I think Florida is a state that's probably going to be less impacted by it because we weren't heavily dependent on the write-off for state income tax and the like. But that said, I argued, look, our tax code is better today than it was before we passed that bill, substantially better, which is why I voted for it. But if I had written it all by myself, king for a day, the tax code would have had other things in it. It would have had a higher child tax credit. I would have made it fully deductible, meaning you could have taken the entire $2,000 and applied it against your payroll tax, and that probably would have dealt with a lot of the situations you're outlining there. There are things I would have done differently on the business side. I would have made the immediate expensing permanent, forever, and meaning anytime a business takes money and invests it to hire new people, for example, they would be able to write that off 100%. I hope we can make those changes. I'll work to make those changes. And on the individual side, obviously every case is different. I'd have to see a detail about which one you're discussing. But I know that if we had made the child tax credit fully refundable the way I wanted, people would have gotten less. I made it higher. I had to threaten to vote against the bill to get more, but it should have been the full amount. And we'll keep pushing to make that happen.
Senator Rubio, thank you for your time.
Thank you.